Last year, during Chodesh Elul, we learned Hilchos Esrog. It was decided to continue in Hilchos Minim, and this month we're going to learn Hilchos Lulav. We began already learning Hilchos Lulav. The Gemara Masechta Sukkah, when discussing the Esrog, the Gemara behandles how do we know that pre-Eitz Hadar is referring to an Esrog. Pre-Eitz Hadar, a nice fruit. Who said it's an Esrog? So the Gemara has different rayas, drashas that we know that pre-Eitz Hadar is an Esrog. When it comes to Lulav, there's no discussion. Everybody knows that a Lulav, when the Torah says Kapos, Tmarim, Kapos, coming to branches, Tmarim from a date tree, a lulav is a lulav that comes from a date tree. That's pretty clear. Tmarim, a lulav is from Kapos Tmarim. The Gemara, however, discusses in Daf Lamed Beis Amud Aleph, in the branches of a lulav tree, what type of branches? Fresh branches, not dried out. What part of the branches? What part of the tree? But it's very clear that when we're talking about the lulav, we're talking about a Kapos Tmarim, a date tree. When the Torah says Kapos Tmarim, branches, Tmarim from a date tree, does there actually have to be dates on the tree? Tmarim of a date tree, does there have to be dates? The Gemara, there's a Mishnah in Menachos, the Mishnah Menachos of Chav Zayin Amud Aleph, when the Mishnah lists the different items that, let's say a mitzvah has a few items made out of a few minim, the minim that are ma'akfen zeh. One of them is dalad minim. The dalad minim, if a person has a lulav hadassam and a ravas, he doesn't have an esrog. So the din is, you're not yoitza. You can't make a bracha if you don't have all four minim. You have to have all four minim. So the Gemara says, Zok the Gemara, the dalad minim, the Gemara Menachos, Beis mehem oisa peiris, two of the minim make peiris, Beis mehem ein oisa peiris. Two of them are oisa peiris and two are not oisa peiris. Which are the two that are oisa peiris? Zok Rashi, oisa peiris is the esrog. The esrog tree obviously makes peiris. The esrog is called a pri. And the other one, Zok Rashi, is the lulav, the tmarim. It's oisa peiris. A lulav tree is oisa peiris because these dates, that's the oisa peiri. So the shaila that's discussed in the achroinim, and a lot of achroinim is, does the lulav have to come from a tree that has fruit? Does a let's say there's no fruit, there's no tamarim, there's no dates on the tree, and you took such a lulav, are you yoitze or dafka? If you have to have a lulav that comes dafka from a tree that has tamarim, that has it's oisa peiris. Does it have to be oisa peiris bepoyol? Does it have to make peiris? Or as long as it's a type of tree that makes peiris, even if there happen to have not been peiris on this tree, you still yoitze with such a type of lulav. To bring out the shaila, let's say you have an old tree. Eventually a date tree, when it gets old, it stops producing fruit. But even though it stops producing fruit, lulavim, it's still, lulavim are the branches are still knocking away. So let's say it stopped making fruit, but it's still making lulavim. Is the lulavim a kosher? Could you use the lulavim without the fruit coming out? Another nafkamina, which this was a shaila also discussed in the Poskim. Let's say in the cold countries, that even if the trees grow, but the fruits don't grow, which means the date trees grow with lulavim, but no fruits grow on the tree. So could you take a lulav from such a tree that no fruit grow on the tree? The same as if you don't have the soil, it's not a good ground, and it doesn't produce, the fruit don't come out from the date tree. Could you take such a lulav? Are you yoitze with a lulav that doesn't have dates? The Torah says kapos tmarim, branches tmarim from a date tree. And lamaisa, this is not, there's no dates. If it doesn't, dates don't grow. Maybe you're not yoitze. Dilma, you're yoitze because it's a type of tree that produces fruit, even though this particular one doesn't. Another nafkamina, and to bring out this nafkamina, you have to introduce to the Olam what's mavur in the Rishonim, Rabbeinu B'chaya, and it's really a Rashi in Psachim Daf Nun Vav. Rashi says that there are two types of date trees. There's a date tree that's a zachar and a date tree that's an akeva. And one of them is oisaperis and one is ein oisaperis. Rashi says that the akeva is ein oisaperis, the metzias is fakeret, they say maybe an ashtana metzias, but one of the trees is oisaperis and one is ein oisaperis. Which means, whether if it's half the date trees do not produce dates. Could you use the lulavim from such trees? And the shaila really can get complicated, because how are you supposed to tell where the lulav came from? Some say you could tell if a lulav came from a male or a female tree. But what's about if the tree, if it's cold or any of that, could you tell that it's a tree that the fruit didn't come from? So what's the halach of a date tree that doesn't produce dates? Could you take a lulav from such a tree? The Chassam Sofer in Sukkah Daf Lamed Daled Amud Beis, the Chassam Sofer says, Pnei zeh, nirali noyagim lehedya, beli pikbuk likach lulavim hagdelim b'mdina seinu, in the cold countries, says the Chassam Sofer, that anyways that will never ever produce fruit, will never come out on those trees. Asher la'olam la'yoytzi tmarim, makol mokim mikri kapos tmarim. So why are you allowed to take it? It's still called kapos tmarim, what the Torah is talking about. Because when the Torah says kapos tmarim, the Torah doesn't mean that fruit have to actually come out. Kapos tmarim is talking about a min. A min of a tree. How does the Chassam Sofer know that? It brings a raya. The Torah says, arvei nachal. By aravis, you have to take arvei nachal, aravis that grow by a river, by a stream. Still, the halacha is the Rambam, and it's brought in Shulchan Aruch and Siman Tafresh Mem Zayin. It's not ma'akev. Even if aravis don't grow by a stream, even aravis, says the Rambam, that grow in a midbar, it's kosher. Why is it kosher? The Torah says arvei nachal, aravis nachal, by a stream. The Torah is not saying that the aravis have to grow by a stream. The Torah wants to explain what type of aravis, the type of aravis that grow by a stream. But it doesn't have to grow by a stream. Even if it doesn't grow by a stream, it's also kosher. The Mela says the Chassam Sofer, kapos tmarim doesn't mean tmarim that the tmarim actually have to grow. Even if the tmarim don't grow out of the tree, it has to be the sug of a tree that even if tmarim don't grow out, it's still, even if it doesn't grow out, but if it's a sug, what we're talking about is a date tree, that a lulav that comes from such a tree is kosher. Therefore, all the cases that we spoke about, if it's cold temperatures like he's speaking about, or if it's an old tree, or if the soil is not good, or if it's the zachar and a keva tree, any of those are all going to be a lulav that comes from that tree is kosher. That's the Chassam Sofer. But what's the shaila? Creates harder is referring to the so you're asking in the harder or the pre-8, the fruit itself?
More or less, it's asking because it's a pre-8 that is harder. When you say that, it doesn't mean that you have to have it in there each one. The harder should be possible because of that. It's just the seven the same way that we love or by the
You really you're asking pre-8's harder, and we darshan the din harder. So you say maybe harder lets his hadar be'ilah mashana l'shan, or any of the drashas. I hear the shaila. How could you say maybe hadar that's coming to say to be magdid a fruit, and maybe you don't need hadar, the hadar de gedin. The Chazon Ish has a different mahalach and explains why you don't need fruit growing on the tree. Not that you don't need fruit, you do need fruit. But even if fruit don't grow, you could take a lulav from such a tree. Zok the Chazon Ish and Hilchos Lulav, Siman Beis, you've caught in Yud Ches. Zok the Chazon Ish that since if you would take this tree that doesn't have fruit, he's talking about the Zachar and the Keva, and you would be markiva with a tree that fruit does grow, and what's going to happen? Out of these two trees, a tree is going to grow and they're going to have fruit. So it's considered as if this tree over here is also a tree that's Monsey Paris. This tree is considered a tree that's Monsey Paris. So mainly, even if you have a tree that dates don't come out, whether if it's He doesn't talk about an old tree, but any tree that if you would be markev and dates would come out, it's considered oisa peiris, and memela, you could take a lulav from such a tree. Rabbeinu Bechaya, what'd you say? That's a good shiloh. Of Shlomo Yosef is asking, the Chazon Ish is talking about a zachar and a keva, one of them that doesn't have, you mark of it. What's about a cold place, or even a tree that's an old tree? Is that considered that it's oisa peiris? But a cold place, let's say what Shlomo Yosef is asking, if you're going to be marketed with 4 trees in a cold place, it's still not going to be oisa peiris. Elamai, you'll bring it with a tree that's oisa peiris, which means in a warm climate. So is that called oisa peiris? I don't know. Yeah, it's a good ara.
No, it's a kosher came there to work. Because this tree, Lisa gave out, was able to give out. Such a potential, if you grab it. This tree was able to.
How the Chazon Ish understands is that when you mark 2 trees, so the next tree is going to have peiros. So we look at these 2 trees, the parents, ki'ilu, the tree that came out, that's oisa peiros. So the tree that you have now that's not oisa peiros, we look at it as if it is oisa peiros.
Because it will or because it could? I think that's the difference. Because you will grab it.
Because you're saying because it could, so you say that a cold place also it's shaykh because.
The tree is shaykh. You grab it now, it's cold, but the tree is much more shaykh than if you can grab it.
So then an old tree is not shaykh, it's finished. Unless you invite if you mark it with a different one. Rabbeinu Bechaya has a drasha, kamada drasha, that even an elon without peiros is still kosher for a lulav. Why? He goes on to the psuk, the words that we're learning now, l'kachtem lachem b'yom harishin pri eitz hadar kapois tmarim, the lulav. So first of all, he says kapois lashon rabim. You don't have to take 2 lulavim, like the Gemara says kapois chaser vav, that only 1. If it's really lashon yachad, only 1 lulav, let it say kaf. The Torah says if it would say kaf, you would say you only have to take 1 leaf. So maybe it says kapois, but without a vav, lashon yachid, but you have to take a full lulav. Frekta beinu b'chaya. So oibazoi, why does it say tmarim? Let it say kapois tamar. So beinu b'chaya, since these 2 types of date trees, these are zachar tree and an akeva tree, either one of them that you take a lulav from, it's kosher. So maybe Rabbeinu Bechaya has his darshaning kamat from the words tmarim that either type of tree is going to be kosher. Weiter later on in the Achronim, the Poskim, Reb Shlomo Zalman has a different hezber why you could use a tree that doesn't have peiros, and he says a chiddush like this: up until now, we understood that kapois tmarim means kapois, the branches, tmarim from a date tree, but we're referring tmarim to the dates. So the Melo, we're pretty sure that we have to have dates, or maybe the Chassam Sofer says lav dafka, or it's considered you have fruit. Reb Shlomo Zalman says that tmarim is not actually referring to the fruit, it's referring to the tree. Just like you find by grapes. Grapes, the vineyard is called geffen, and the grapes itself are called anavim. There's a different name to the tree than to the fruit. Sometimes it's the same thing. Zayas, for an example, the tree is zayas and the fruit is zayas. But when it comes to tmarim, the tree is, tmarim is the tree. What's the name of the fruit? Dvash. The name of the fruit is dvash. So the Mela, when the Torah says kapois tmarim, the Torah is referring to a fruit, a lulav that comes from tmarim, from a date tree. We said the Gemara says oisa peiros. The min is oisa peiros, but it's not ma'akev. But says of Shlomo Zalman, if you would learn that tmarim is talking about the fruit itself, and the Torah says kapois tmarim, branches, tmarim from, we're talking about, means the branches that are with fruit, then you can't say the fruit is lav dafka. It would be ma'akev to take a lulav dafka from a tree that has tmarim. But since tmarim is referring to the tree, a little bit like the Chassam Sofer, but he doesn't say like the Chassam Sofer. The Chassam Sofer says tmarim is referring to tmarim, but it's lav dafka, it's just talking about the sug. He's saying, Dr. Shlomo Zalman, since tmarim is not talking about the fruit, Tmarim is talking about the tree, so it's a type of tree. Even if it's not oisa peiris, the lulav is going to be kosher. Ramoshe Nechuva also brings all the cases and he says it'll be kosher. Before going into where this comes out even more lamaisa, since we're speaking about oisa peiris, it's kedai to mention, it's the place to mention over here, the drisha in Hilchos Arla, and it's more ba'arichas in the Meiri and Magen Avos. The Gemara says, we just said that 2 of the 4 minim of Arba minim are called oisa peiris. Which 2? The esrog and the lulav. The esrog is oisa peiris because the esrog is a pri, and the lulav is oisa peiris because he's tmarim. The Meiri says, the Drisha brings it also, and he says that really all 4 of the dalad minim, they are peiris. The lulav is a pri. The hadassim, the aravis is a peri. And he brings the targum on the pasuk in Parshas Emor L'kachtem Lachem. You take a look on the targum, the lashon targum. The sisva l'chaim b'yoyme kadma peirei ilana. Lashon rabim and peirei ilana. What type of fruit should you take? Says the targum, esroigim lulavim adasim v'arvei nachal. All 4 of the minim are called fruits. If all 4 of the minim are called fruits, why does the Gemara say Beis mehem oisa peiris or Beis mehem ein oisa peiris? All of them are fruits and they're all oisa peiris. So if them the teretz is, I'll be the Shebali Aleket that says, he himself speaks it out. The Shebali Aleket speaks in Hilchos Brachas that berries that come from Adasim, you make a shahakol. Because it's not called a peri mu'ula. It's a shvacha pri, you only make a shahakol. It's brought la'alach and Shulchan Aruch some reish gimel sif hey. You only make a shahakol. What's his raya that it's called a peri, not a peri mu'ula? He says varaya from over here. The Gemara says beis behem oisa peiris, esrog and the lulav, and it doesn't say the hadasim and the aravis. It doesn't say is oisa peiris. Either hadasim is oisa peiris, the berries. The teretz is it's not a peri mu'ula. So Mamela, even though you could say that all 4 are considered peri, only beis behem oisa peiris is peri mu'ula, which is the esrog itself, and the lulav, which is the tmarim. So what we have so far over here is a whole list of achronim that say that you could take a lulav from a tree that doesn't have fruit on it. Mi'idach and Safras Paneach on the Rambam Perek Zayin of lulav, he makes this shaila a machloikis in the Yerushalmi Perek Gimel of Sukkah. He makes it a machloikis Reb Tarfon and Reb Akiva. The lashon Reb Akiva oimer kapois tmarim, Reb Tarfon oimer kapois tmarim kishmon. So he explains, what does it mean kapois tmarim kishmon? As long as the name is kapois tmarim, it's a date tree. Even if there's no dates, it's kosher. So he brings it to machloikas l'maisa la'alacha. All the poskim say that even if dates don't grow in it, it's kosher. L'maisa, in the previous generation, there was a big machloikas haposkim about the canary lulav. Lulav, it's called the canary lulav because it grew in the Canary Islands in the Atlantic Ocean. The lulav looked like our lulav, almost like our lulav, had fruit. It didn't really taste like tmarim, but more or less a date tree. And the shaila was, if such a lulav is kosher, is such a lulav kosher to take? One of the nidoinim of the canary lulav was that it's not really oisa peiris, which means even if the fruit are not really roi lachila, it's not called oisa peiris. And Lamaisa, the Gemara says that you need it should be oisa peiris. The Gemara says it should be oisa peiris. That's the definition of the 2 minim. So Reb Shlomo Zalman, which Reb Shlomo Zalman was the one that's mater the canary lulav, and Reb Shlomo Zalman said that just like I explained why a tree, a real date tree that doesn't have dates on it is kosher. Why? Because the Torah is just referring to the kind of tree, the date tree. So too the canary lulav also, that's what the Torah means, a date tree. Even if there's no actual fruit on it, it's still going to be kosher. So mainly it was matter a lulav, a canary lulav that came from a tree that was bedoima to our date trees, that was Reb Shlomo Zalman. Lamaisa, you're not going to find the lulavim on the market. Ramosha was pasul. The Ramosha has al tshuva, it's pasul. There's other nidoidim about it also. And Lamaisa, it's not the etzem shchiach. However, Sai, Rabbi David told me earlier in Eretz Yisrael, you know these trees, so some are trees that you could take lulavim from, some that have lulavim that are not kosher, so these many different lulavim trees, that comes out. And Rabbi Avram Wright, which Be'ez Hashem will speak here in a week from now, he said he's giving a shiur in Florida this year, that over there also they have a lot of palm trees, and some of the trees, it's not a canary tree, but it's a different tree that's bedoima. It's not, the fruit is not exactly a date, but it's oisa peiris, it looks like a lulav tree, so that's the shaila. It's not a new shaila of this year, but that's also nichlal in the shaila, if it's called oisa peiris, and if that's what the Torah means, Kapot Tmarim. So we spoke so far in Kapot Tmarim, the part of the pasuk of Tmarim. Kapot Tmarim is the lulav. The Tmarim part, you have to have fruit or not. We'll try to speak a little bit in the word of kapos, which kapos is the branch or kapos held together. So first of all, kapos lashon rabim, it's chaser vav, so you don't have to take two lulavim. But lamaisa, kapos also means held together. Since, like kafos, since kafos, you need a lulav to be held together, the Ramah and Sif Aleph, which we're starting to learn now, Tafresh Mem Hey, Dine Lulav, the Ramah says that a lulav, l'tchatchila, m'kalmaka mitzvah min ha'mufcha b'lulav she'ein olav perudais lagamri. In other words, the lulav should be more or less together. The leaves shouldn't be spread out. These are machloikis apoiskim, the Taz, the Mishabur brings us machloikis, and the Bekur Yaakov. How close together do you need it? Could it be a little bit open, or could it be even more than a little bit open? Should it be completely together? The tzad why you should to learn that is a mitzvah min hamufcher, that the lulav should be completely together as opposed to spread out. Zok the levush, because the Torah says kapos tmarim, kafos, it should be held together. The more it's held together, the more of a kiyum you have of kapos tmarim. And memela, it's better. The lulav, the more the lulav is held together, it's better. It's not possible if it's open, spread out, not the leaves are split, but more the lulav is open, it's not possible. But hamiu, it's better when it's held together. The poskim already speak that even though together, even l'tchatchila it should be together, but how much together? Rabbi Yashiv says a little bit open, that's still called completely closed. I don't want people should get very nervous now when you pick up a lulav. It's a good lulav, you could see it drop the light in between the leaves. You're going to get nervous that's not together. Rabbi Yashiv says that's nichlal, what the Torah says kafos together. It doesn't mean it should be glued together, pretty close together. His Eidim Yibadul Hachaim, Rabbi Israel Auerbach, they bring says, I don't know if he says it from his father-in-law, but even if you would put it down on the table, then it's going to be together, or when you shake it, it goes together. That's also considered together, and you have a kiyum of this Ramah, kafos, it being held together. One more din of kafos. In Hilchos Scheiner, the Shulchan Aruch says that a Scheiner we take off the rings from the lulav. Explains the Beis Agoyla. I don't understand like how the Makoyer, but he says, he brings the Rishonim, brings the Tur, the Mordechai, that since kafos, which means held together, is chaser vav, so only the 6 days is it supposed to be held together, and the 7th day you take off the ring, it doesn't have to be held together. Interesting, it doesn't have the vav. But since it doesn't have the vav, just the 6 days is when you don't have to when you need it together, not the 7th day, and therefore Shana Rabbi, you take off the rings. So just to sum up what we had over here tonight, Kapos Tmarim, which was talking about the lulav, the main thing is that Tmarim, it's a date tree. Do they have to be fruit? Papashas, you don't have to have fruit. but at least it's referring to the mean of a date tree, and therefore there's a shaila of other trees that are bedoimit to our date tree. Does that also go into the date tree that we're talking about? And then we spoke about kapos, that it should be held together, and held together is really nichlal, and what the tzur of a lulav should be, what the tzur of a lulav should be. This is akdama before we start the simon, the halachas. Once you have already a lulav, the dinim.